Welcome back. I got another chess video for you guys. I'm going to apologize ahead of time. This game, my opponent was not very strong, and he played a couple of blunders. But I'm going to show this video because it has a good little lesson on pawn structure, and I played a bishop trap in this game. So I'm going to mainly show it for those two things. I played it on Yahoo against Red Veen. I was the white pieces, and I started out with f4. Played out his knight. I played out my knight. Played e6. Played e3. He played his knight to f6. Brought my bishop out, hoping to trade on this square and double his pawns over here. He brought out his bishop to c5, allowing me to trade on c6. He takes with the b pawn. I castle. He castles. I go to c3. He plays d6. Now, this allows me to look at this bishop and see if I can play something against it. The bishop can only play on this diagonal now, because since he played d6, he blocked in his bishop to this side of the board. Now, the only four squares it can go to, I own two of them, and these other two he owns. So, you don't want to play b4, just kicking the bishop and putting pressure on him, because he can get away, and then if you try to chase it down to get after it, he can play a6 to get a square to retreat to, and your attack was too slow. Now, you did gain a nice pawn chain over there and kicked his bishop all the way to the side, but his bishop is still attacking on this diagonal. Now, the trap is a little it's a little sneakier. You play a4, because now if he doesn't do anything, then you can play b4, and when he retreats, then you can push the a pawn, trapping in his bishop. So he did not see this, and he played e5. So I went ahead and did that, and he took on f4 because he knew that if I went back, then I could play a5 and trap in his bishop. Now, it was interesting because d4 is actually a much better way to trap in the bishop, because he can't take, and if he goes back to b6 here, you can still push your pawn, and you can't take because you got your rook here. So d4 is a stronger move, and if he tries to go ahead and take, then you can just take back with your e pawn. You still have the strong chain, and after all is said and done, you can try and gain strength on the e file with your rook. And if he goes ahead and takes to gain a pawn for the trade, then you can just go ahead and just take with the knight and maintain your pawns. You don't have to separate this pawn and isolate it. So he's not really going to mess up your pawn chain or anything. So go back, and I played b4 in the game, and he went ahead and he took on f4, so I took his bishop, and he took back. Now, I thought here for a good, maybe about a minute, and I have two options. I can take this pawn. Well, I have many options, but if I want to take some pawns back, I can take on the e3 square, or I can take on the d6 square. Well, I saw that if I take on d6, then he can take right back on d2. I can take with my queen, and then he can undouble his pawns on the c file by taking with his c pawn. And now I have a bishop against two pawns, so technically I'm up a pawn, but he has these two isolated pawns against my one isolated pawn. So he's going to try and put as much pressure pushing these two pawns down with as much backing force as possible, so that he can bring them down here to either get a queen or make me trade off a piece so he doesn't do so. But I mean, I have many options to stop that, but I mean, this is just going to give him one more area of getting an advantage over me. So I decided to take this pawn on e3 to force him, if he wants to take back a pawn, he has to take back on c5, which he did in the game. And now look, I've won the bishop for 2 pawns, but his 2 pawns are all here on the c-file. And this is a horrible, horrible setup for your pawns. All I got to do is put a piece there or a pawn there, and none of these pawns are going anywhere. So, taking in this specific manner, I've kind of made these pawns useless because they don't have any pawns on either side of it to help protect them or advance them, really. So I was up a piece, and I wasn't worried about his pawns at all, so I decided to start trading off pieces. Then I put my knight to d2. He brought out his bishop attacking my rook, and then I pushed my pawn blocking these pawns on the c-file, and it's guarded with my knight, so that's all fine. He brought in his knight. I moved my rook to protect my pawn. He brought in his rook. I moved my knight attacking this pawn, which isn't really necessary, but it also puts an extra piece guarding my e3 pawn by the bishop. And he went and took, which is just a blunder because it loses a piece. And then he gained the pawn on c4. And then the good move here is knight to e5. Knight to e5 just outright wins a piece and basically the game, because the only 2 squares that the rook can retreat to protect the bishop is going to be c3 and d4. And d4 is guarded by my bishop, so I can take back, and if he goes to c3, I can take with my knight. So he's just going to lose a piece in this, and that's in that point. Unfortunately, I just took on c5, still attacking his rook though. He moved his rook, and I decided to start trading some more pieces. He can't move the rook unless he wants to lose his bishop. So we traded. He moved to d5. I moved my rook to b1, trying to get this pawn out of the way and then march my pawn down. He's attacking my bishop, and I move to d7. If he goes ahead and takes my bishop, like so, then this is mate. The only place he can go is bring his rook back. Checkmate. So that's why he can't take. So he moved his pawn to allow his king to go somewhere. So now I have to deal with this threat. And I took on the pawn. And then he moved his pawn to h6. I moved to e1, saying, hey, let's trade some more pieces because I'm up a lot. And he comes over here attacking my bishop. Got to retreat my bishop. Now, he should have just taken my pawn. I mean, I am up 2 pieces here, and I have this passed pawn right here. All I got to do is put my rook behind it and march it down. But instead of him taking, he just moved to g5. So I protected the pawn, saying, thank you for allowing me to do that. And then he moved to g4. I guess his plan was he saw 3 pawns against 2, but, I mean, my plan is much faster, and I have much more pieces, and his king is not backing these pieces to queen down here, so I was not worried at all. I moved to e5, protecting my knight, and this is an interesting little setup here, because this knight is attacking the f8 and f6 square, and this knight is attacking the f7 and g6 square. So I'm pretty much blocking the king in, and it can't really go anywhere because, I mean, this pawn is guarding the last part of this L shape right here. So he pushed to h5, and I wasn't worried about that, so I started marching my pawn down. Then he moved to g3. We swapped. I moved my pawn all the way to the 7th. It's protected by my bishop. He moved his king. I moved my rook to b1 to get it down there, and then he decided to go here to take my knight, which is protected by my other knight, so I wasn't worried. So I brought it down, and he took, and I was up so many pieces, I didn't really think about my next move, and I just took back with my knight, where I should have taken his rook, which wins a knight for a rook, and now this is being attacked by my knight. So I should have taken, but I didn't. He took, I took with my knight, he took the pawn that was soon to become a queen, and now this game is just over, and my opponent resigned.